Hi, everybody, and welcome on behalf of the Public Library of Mount Vernon and Knox County and the NEA Big Read. I want to thank everybody for joining us today to help celebrate Sandra Cisneros' The House on Mango Street. And I have here with me two fantastic people to join in this conversation. My friend and a wonderful scholar and poet, Crystal Ac Salas. She's joining us in conversation about the book and its author, and our NEA project intern, who has already worked really hard today, Fisher Wheeler, is here with us from Kenyon College. So I also want to take this opportunity to thank the Kenyon College Office for Community Partnerships, Brown Family Environmental Center, Gun Gallery, and the mayor's office in Mount Vernon, Ohio, for making this kickoff celebration of the Big Read really special. And none of this would be happening without funding from the National Endowment for the Arts. The NEA Big Read is a project of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with Arts Midwest. And we are really thankful for their support that lets us do all of this really cool, fun stuff. So it is now my great honor to introduce today's guest, Crystal Ac Salas. Crystal is coming to us with so many credentials that I had to actually type them out. And even though we know one another professionally and personally, I want to make sure that I do her justice because she is an absolutely fabulous Chicanx poet, essayist, educator, and community organizer. Her work has appeared in Northwest Review, Pank Magazine, World Literature Today, Chaparral Poetry, Acentos Review, and others. She's a founding member of the Break Bread Literacy Project, which works alongside youth to elevate the voices of young creatives under the age of 25. And she serves as poetry editor for their quarterly publication, Break Bread Magazine. A 2021 California Arts Council Individual Artist Grant recipient. It's a really big deal. You know how many people there are in California, and she got picked? Her chapbook, Grief Logic, is forthcoming in April 2022 from Gunpowder Press. She lives in Los Angeles, where she writes about the city's landscapes of grief and remembrance, memorialized and unmemorialized spaces. Crystal may also be familiar to many of you because she's a longtime friend of the library, and we've been working with Break Bread with poetry workshops and writing workshops and publishing workshops and all sorts of opportunities. So she's been helping to bolster our teen programming for a couple years now. So thank you so much for joining us, Crystal. And why don't you tell us a little bit about the House on Mango Street?
Thank you, Jamie Lynn, for a generous introduction. It's good to be back in Ohio. I wish I was actually there, but I am zooming in from Los Angeles today. Yeah, I can't wait to talk about the House on Mango Street today. Just a few things about its accolades. It was first published in 1984. It won the Before Columbus Foundation's American Book Award in 1985, which is a really exciting award that many of my peers have gone on to win. And it's required reading in middle schools, high schools, universities across the country. Since then, it's sold over 6 million copies since its initial publication, and it's still doing that. And 2009 marked the 25th anniversary of its publication, so it's been around even longer than that. And Sandra Cisneros is currently working with a composer, Derek Vernon, to create an opera, The House on Mango Street, the opera, and previews of it were held prior to the pandemic. So it has already lived a life well off the page. In terms of on the page, House on Mango Street is a series of vignettes from the perspective of young Esperanza Cordero, a girl growing up in a Latinx enclave of Chicago, who, after years of her family of moving from place to place, understands that her family finally intends to stay in this house, finally achieving a dream that they have promised to her throughout her life. It's not what she expected it would be when she dreamed of a place of permanence, as she writes, but it's not, or as Esperanza says in the book, but it's not the way they told it at all. It's small and red with tight steps in front and windows so small you'd think they were holding their breath. Bricks are crumbling in places, and the front door is so swollen you have to push hard to get in. But even so, her desire to connect and with something, someone, anything, anyone roots her in ways she at first resisted. In House on Mango Street, you will be gifted the tour of her neighborhood, as generous as only a child can be, as poetic and sensitive as only a child navigating the world with her first-timer glasses can be. From vignette to vignette, which is a brief scene, so the story is told in brief scenes, you will meet Esperanza's neighbors of all generations. You'll hear the legends, the chismes, which is gossip, the dreams of Mango Street. You'll ponder its ghosts. Trigger warning, there are some mentions of sexual and gender-based violence in this book as well, so do take care of yourself as you walk alongside her. In so many ways, when rereading this book, now as an adult, first time as a preteen, you'll see my very well-loved copy here. I think it's maybe one of the originals. I am left struck with an appreciation, a reverence of the level of observance I have had to lose in order to become an adult, who I suppose needs to act like I have certainties about human nature in order to survive. Esperanza, her breath of fresh air, is curious and wide open, collecting so much information about how she has been or will come to be placed in this world. The brilliance of Cisneros has us learning these codings right alongside her, reacquainting ourselves with our very first mortal wounds, punctured by acquired knowledge of what it means to be a woman, a Chicana, and or a person whose family lives shoved in the margins by factors of class. And it also is a story of resilience to find beauty in the desolation and hard realities. Esperanza is the Spanish word for hope and possibility, after all. And I'd love to read an excerpt, if that's okay, from House on Mango Street, which was very difficult to choose. And actually, no, before we go in, we're going to talk about why we chose it. And so I'm going to pass it back to Jamie Lynn.
Thank you, Crystal. I was following what you were saying and I forgot I still had a little work to do. So there are many reasons that we chose the book. When you apply for an NEA Big Read grant, they give you a list of like 6 to 10. I think it kind of varies a little bit year to year, books by American authors. And, you know, we chose The House on Mango Street. For me personally, it was mostly because of the language, right? The book is lyrically beautiful. And the innovative storytelling structure, I think, is still kind of groundbreaking. You know, we're still writing like traditional modernist novels with a tidily put together chapter, rather than the vignettes and the scene work and the overarching kind of like wave of movement. I think the way that this text moves is really an important thing to understand. And if you're not somebody who likes to read a lot, they're really short excerpts. It's shorter. Many of them are shorter than like a magazine or newspaper article. And so I felt like it was really accessible to people who maybe wouldn't consider themselves readers necessarily, or, you know, if like me, you have a short attention span, you can find it these are such small, satisfying scenes. And so very telling and really rich. So, you know, the other reason that we picked it is because it's set in the Midwest. Esperanza is living in Chicago, right? And it's a Chicanics experience, and it's a working class experience. And I think that, you know, the life that she is living, even though obviously she's growing up in the 1960s, like a few things have changed here or there. But as you mentioned, Crystal, you know, life on the margins, I mean, I think will be very familiar to many people in Knox County, you know, and the way that like the experiences that women have coming of age and, you know, finding a home and achieving home ownership is like part of the American dream, right? So finding a place for yourself, it's so universal. And these elements kind of like combine to create a work that's even more powerful in the sum of its parts. So I think that, all of those things are wonderful. And we also wanted to choose something that would promote cross-cultural understanding. I think the Latinx population in Knox County is under 3%, very small part of our population, if you can rely upon numbers, so, but it's increasingly, community members are increasingly visible and that population is growing. And I think it's such an exciting time to be doing this work and to find something that helps us understand what, people's lives are like that aren't necessarily exactly like ours, or what it was like 50 years ago to be a little girl growing up in Chicago in a Mexican American neighborhood. These are all part of why we picked it. And there's so much nuance and so much complexity to this. It's one experience, right? So Mango Street is not meant to be like, this is what everyone's life is like who grows up Chicanx in the 1960s. It's one experience. There are many, many shades and nuances to that. And I can't help but be excited about the ways that the books we're using and the other artists that we've invited are going to kind of share that complexity with people in Knox County. I could not help but notice on the shelf behind you, I have the same book.
Yeah,
so we've been
represent.
the same thing. I think we actually bought it the same week. It was really funny. But
you did, yeah.
We're using this for lots of different writing exercises and like really opening up the door to like a new and emerging generation of Chicanx and Latinx authors and artists of all sorts. So, kind of long-winded, and I apologize, but there's so much to rave about with this book and so much that invites the reader in that I was really excited when we got the grant, and now here we are living it up. So I think the next thing, Crystal, like, could I invite you to read now? Would you share a piece with us from the book that you found moving and talk about it a little bit?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your note about nuance and complexity. And yeah, it was very difficult as readers, Knox County readers will soon discover to select an excerpt, but I tried my best and I selected one excerpt of the many I could have selected. So this one is called Sally. And on my book, it's page 81, but so Sally. Sally is the girl with eyes like Egypt and nylons the color of smoke. The boys at school think she's beautiful because her hair is shiny black like raven feathers, and when she laughs, she flicks her hair back like a satin shawl over her shoulders and laughs. Her father says to be this beautiful is trouble. They are very strict in his religion. They are not supposed to dance. He remembers his sisters and is sad. Then she can't go out. Sally, I mean. Sally, who taught you to paint your eyes like Cleopatra? And if I roll the little brush with my tongue and chew it to a point and dip it in the muddy cake, the one in the little red box, will you teach me? I like your black coat and those shoes you wear. Where did you get them? My mother says to wear black so young is dangerous, but I want to buy shoes just like yours, like your black ones made out of suede, just like those. And one day when your mother's in a good mood, when my mother's in a good mood, maybe after my next birthday, I'm going to ask to buy the nylons too. Cheryl, who is not your friend anymore, not since last Tuesday before Easter, not since the day you made her ear bleed, not since she called you that name and bit a hole in your arm, and you looked as if you were going to cry, and everyone was waiting, and you didn't, Sally. Not since then, you don't have a best friend to lean against the schoolyard fence with, to laugh behind your hands at what the boys say. There is no one to lend you her hairbrush. The stories the boys tell in the coat room, they're not true. You lean against the schoolyard fence alone with your eyes closed, as if no one was watching, as if no one could see you standing there, Sally. What do you think about when you close your eyes like that? And why do you always have to go straight home after school? You become different, Sally. You pull your skirt straight. You rub the blue paint off your eyelids. You don't laugh, Sally. You look at your feet and walk fast to the house you can't come out from. Sally, do you sometimes wish you didn't have to go home? Do you wish your feet would one day keep walking and take you far away from Mango Street? Far away, and maybe your feet would stop in front of a house, a nice one with flowers and big windows and steps for you to climb up 2 by 2 upstairs to where a room is waiting for you. And if you opened the little window latch and gave it a shove, the windows would swing open. All the sky would come in. There'd be no nosy neighbors watching, no motorcycles and cars, no sheets and towels and laundry, only trees and more trees and plenty of blue sky. And you could laugh, Sally. You could go to sleep and wake up and never have to think who likes and doesn't like you. You could close your eyes and you wouldn't have to worry what people said because you never belonged here anyway, and nobody could make you sad, and nobody would think you're strange because you like to dream and dream. And no one could yell at you if they saw you out in the dark leaning against a car, leaning against somebody without someone thinking you are bad, without somebody saying it is wrong, without the whole world waiting for you to make a mistake when all you wanted, Sally, was to love and to love and to love and to love, and no one could call that crazy. Oh, gosh. I mean, like, yeah, I'll say things about it, but I feel like it stands alone. Something that really draws me to this, especially at the point in the book where it's at, is like, we are getting this from the perspective, this neighborhood tour from the perspective of Esperanza. But what she sees in the women around her, and the girls around her, are like their complexity and how they're different from her, but also how they are so a reflection of like her own wants and desires. So many of the questions she's asking Sally is like, she's asking those things of herself. And this is there's a lot of ways in which she learns, which Esperanza learned what it is to be considered, to be gendered as woman in this world, to be the like unsaid rules and the said rules, especially like living within the context of a patriarchy and like a chauvinist sort of world. And I think she's kind of, as a child, like learning that through other people. And I think it's just, there's such an innocence to it because she's so open, but there's also you just see her being colored by all of it. And it's heartbreaking, but it's also so hopeful, where it ends. There are lots of vignettes throughout this that get so, they really just break your heart. And then the poet that she is, Sandra Cisneros, she uses this volta to flip at the end. And you have this like moment of, if not like hope, at least like suspension flying, and no one could call you crazy. Sally has so much weighing her down. That Sally probably, as a reader, and as an older reader of this context, knowing what you know that Sally is not going to have an easy life. But in this moment, Esperanza, in her viewing of Sally, is able to sort of like suspend her, in above it all. I would also just love to talk about Sandra Cisneros, like the work in general and how it connects to me. So as a female identifying Chicanx, which, if that's a new term to you, it might be. It's to say that I am Mexican American, born and raised in the United States, a person living with constant dualities. So as a female identifying Chicanx poet myself, I found my intersections with all of these vignettes to be innumerable. But this work stands the test of time and space because it tour guides so many other readers on the basis of their own unique relationships with race, class, and gender. To bring the spirit of another great writer into this space, Toni Morrison, noted Ohioan great, she once said, if there's a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. Cisneros' work is a persistent answer to this decree. She knew her stories were different than what she had read before, which is what made them all the more needed in the world, all the more significant. It was through House on Mango Street that I first learned the musings of a young girl could be immense and interesting and challenging. It was also the first time, like there's nothing elementary about this, right? It was also the first time I saw any kind of depiction of people who resembled the women and girls in my family, the ones living complex lives behind those house walls. Women who often aren't seen outside of their homes or neighborhoods for fear of the limitations of a language barrier in this unfriendly country, restricted by the endless tasks of the home, of struggles with unresourced mental illness, or struggles with unresourced mental illness or gender violence, but also women who are nevertheless creating beauty in the songs that they sing, the care and strength they knit out of thin air, the smells of the brilliant food they make, and the pure poetry they drop when just telling the truth about their lives and what they see and how their days are, even when they would swear they couldn't possibly be poets. Women who dream. She makes them visible when society often renders them invisible. These women, the women I know, were once considered by the Western canon not to have literary merit, and this was reflected in what I was assigned in school as a child. But I was so fortunate to come from a lineage of secret scholars, as I like to call them. The people who raised me may not have had access always to a completed formal education. Mis abuelos, for example, not beyond the 4th grade, but they never let it stop them from being some of the most well-read folks I have yet to meet. Those folks who raised me put this book in my hands outside of the classroom. And Cisneros Esperanza reflected and still reflects to me a girl who does just what I was brought up on at home, in spite of what media depictions and stereotypes told me about myself outside of it. She, Esperanza, doesn't let any of it stop her, and neither do I. Again, Cisneros insists on the visibility of these women. And in this, she was one of my first teachers that urged me to do the same. There was and still remains so many more stories to tell. Sandra Cisneros is not the only Chicana writer out there, and would not be the last, but was certainly the first in my solar system and the first bright star for many of my peers. And that is tremendously important. The first star shows you that there is in fact a sky above you. And as she writes in one of her vignettes, Marin under the street light, dancing by herself, is singing the same song somewhere. I know, is waiting for a car to stop, a star to fall, someone to change her life. It may not be the exact same song, but there's something shared about it, right? Finally, it's not just Cisneros' work, but how she carries it into the world as an activist and community organizer that inspires me. She showed me that a writer can leave home, but that doesn't mean they have to abandon it, In fact, it is imperative that they bring it with them and tell its story to the world. Throughout her career, she has fostered the careers of many other emerging writers through Macondo, which is a writing retreat, named after the town in Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, and the Alfredo Cisneros del Moral Foundation, which is a grant-giving institution serving Texas writers. She lives and practices what I would consider my own writerly dream, one filled with community and yet independence, tenderness, a lot of pets she seems to have. That's the dream. A life with protections around my creativity. And of course, her famous purple house. I'm not sure if she still lives there, but I know it was this very famous purple house. The HOA was all up in her business about it. It was this bright purple color, exactly the color that she wanted, and no matter what anyone thinks. And I just always saw that as a dream for myself, as Esperanza herself longs for a house all on my own, quiet as snow, a space for myself to go. And I'm just so thrilled that you all get the opportunity to hear Sandra Cisneros speak this month, because every time I've had the opportunity to hear her, she always says something profound that just strikes me to my core and haunts me forever. Most recently at the Los Angeles Festival of Books in 2019, I got to see her at a panel, and she explained some of her simple rules for writing, which were this: tell the truth, don't hurt anyone. Which is not to say that the truth isn't painful, so often it is, but it doesn't need to be a perpetuation of violence. The truth can open. I hope you will feel opened and connected to the world of Mango Street and these brilliant vignettes.
Crystal, that was so beautiful. Like, I think you should write all of that down and publish it. Like, what a wonderful tribute. And I think as you were talking, there were so many synapses firing off in my head. I'm going to try to capture the thing that as a Midwestern reader, like from rural Ohio, I think like what I found so recognizable very often in the book were the ways that women live their lives and the confinement of the home, and the obligations, as you mentioned, of housekeeping and child rearing and caregiving are things that like I never really wanted to do. So I remember when I was a young girl, I think I was reading Woman Hollering Creek, probably, like that would have been around the right time. But I remember reading the biography, for, the little about the author, and the first line said, Sandra Cisneros is nobody's mother and nobody's wife.
Yes.
And I was, and this is not to disrespect. I mean, I love, wives, mothers, like these are important roles for women to play in society, but I loved her sort of being like, I am doing my own thing. And I just kind of, and also too, the sort of refusal to have that part of your life define your work. When you read those about the authors for male writers, they don't start with like, oh, he's married to so-and-so. Oh, he does all the dishes. Oh, like whatever it is, right? And truthfully, I think that in some ways, writers in general are starting to mention a little bit more about families, right? As the ways we manage our families change and grow and include everybody. But I loved that. I loved her sort of like forthrightness about it. And also as someone who definitely sought to escape, right? Like not just, kind of like the sort of typical, like American life for a woman, but also too, I really wanted to escape the kind of sadness and abuse that I saw. And those things are common across working class cultures. This is not unique, right? Like, unfortunately. And so I think that it was so inspiring to see her do, as you said, take that with her, and it can be part of you, but it's not all of you. And it's part of your story, and it, informs who you are and, the choices that you make and the things you do in your own life, but it doesn't constrict her. And so like the chapter that I love the most has to be that final one where she is talking about, it's called Mango Says Goodbye Sometimes. And she's talking about having that house. And a place where she says, one day I will pack my bags of books and paper. One day I will say goodbye to Mango. I am too strong for her to keep me here forever. One day I will go away. Friends and neighbors will say, what happened to that Esperanza? Where did she go with all those books and paper? Why did she march so far away? They will not know I have gone away to come back, for the ones I left behind, for the ones who cannot out. And I think about that passage all the time, and how like powerful a decision it is. I also wanted to share the anecdote about her house it was in San Antonio, right? So there was a homeowners association in her neighborhood, and she picked this gorgeous color purple home, but some neighbors whose houses were beige or something had objections to it. And it was a little bit of a war, and Cisneros eventually won. Now, as I understand it, I could be wrong, but the last I read, she had turned that over to Macondo, so that's like a residential place, and now she spends her time between there and her home in Mexico. So, and talk about living a wonderful dream, right? To be able to literally and figuratively cross borders and extend collaborations, and this kind of brings me into like a little bit about her life, because I didn't do her bio at the beginning, because I wanted to sort of move from the work into her life and talk about that a little bit. She has won almost every award there is to be won, including like a MacArthur Genius Award. She's won awards from the Ford Foundation, so many, Texas Institute of Letters, the Dobie Paisano Fellowship, Illinois Artist Fellowship, Chicano Short Story Award, Robert Holloway Lectureship from UC Berkeley, 2 NEA fellowships, 1 in poetry, 1 in prose. And I think when we read her work, it's important to remember that this is a poet writing prose and a novelist who also writes poetry, right? So we have this wonderful, like, just flexibility and agility with her own linguistic art forms. She has honorary degrees from DePaul, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, has won the Texas Medal of the Arts, which I think sounds incredibly cool, and I hope it's a giant gold star. And like has just really like swept across so many like hard-earned and well-deserved acknowledgments of her work. I think there are so many books. Bad Boys, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, which we will have in a book discussion in April. We'll feature that in April. Woman Hollering Creek and Other Stories. Our story time for children this week is Hares Palitos. So we're using that book, which is a little children's colorful book. If you visit the library's YouTube channel, you can see Story Time with Miss Morgan, and she'll be talking about hares. And A House of My Own, Stories from My Life, and Puro Amor, Martina, I Remember You. There are so many things going on. And apparently there's a new poetry collection, Mujer Sin Vergüenza, coming out like now. So we're going to have to expand our collection at the library and include this
Woman
new one.
Without Shame. Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so, well, that sounds really promising considering how sassy she's been sometimes. It'll be really fantastic to hear her take on that for sure. But there's just so much, a little bit of something for everyone, right? When you're looking at her, the list of books that she's composed, whether you like poetry, short stories, a little bit of memoir. I mean, she's done all of it. And we're just so lucky to have the opportunity to have her visit with us. I put in the chat on March 10th at 7 p.m. She's doing her virtual visit. Crystal will be joining us again for that. Fisher and I will be there in the background. But she, has also founded a foundation that, as you mentioned, like supports other up and coming artists, and to bring I believe it was Morrison, into this again. You know, she said, when you open the door, you leave the door open behind you and you bring everyone in who you can bring in. I'm paraphrasing badly, but you know, Cisneros has really taken that to heart and, you know, has mentored other writers and provided for them so that they can have the time and space to write. So that's, you know, is there anything I have forgotten, Crystal? Are there other things we should add that we know about Cisneros that are salient to the work or just fun? Or Fisher, I know you did some research too.
Sounds wonderful. I really appreciate, yeah, I appreciate everything you've said. Yeah.
Well, she has, you know, it was really tough to choose a book. And I'm just really excited that that this was on the list, because it, difficult as it was, as soon as I reread this, because it had been many years, as soon as I reread this, I was like, I think that's the one, you know. And I looked at the other texts and everything, but ultimately we landed with this one, especially for the community in which we live and work in Knox County, Ohio. You know, I thought that this would be something that, like, with this book, right, it's so rich and so incredibly complex, but we wanted to have also like some hope and joy within that. And I love that even though Esperanza goes through so many things, and you can watch her writing and her maturity evolve over the course of the novel, by the end though, she's still looking ahead and she's still like working towards her own goal and making a place for herself in the world. And you can see, if there's one thing Cisneros has done, it is make a place for herself. And she has made it so well and shared it with all of us. So, Crystal, did you have any other comments before we see if anybody has any questions or anything?
No, I just as like her first book, I think it's so cool that it's a thesis of like what her career ended up being, or has ended up being, right? Like A House on Mango Street, like that is the thesis for everything, as you were saying, a place of her own. So thank you for highlighting that.
Well, at this point, if anyone has any questions and you would like to put them in the chat, I'll kind of talk a little bit to buy you some time about our upcoming events that we have going on this week. Today, this afternoon at 4 o'clock, please join us. We have Dr. Clara Roman Odio, who is going to be talking about her work with Latinos in rural America. The exhibit was compiled or composed based on interviews with Latinos living and working in Knox County, Ohio. And we are delighted. She has donated the panels for the exhibit to the public library. So this will become part of our holdings for our permanent collection and in genealogy. And they just provide a snapshot to the hopes, dreams, aspirations, experiences of Latinx people living in Knox County, Ohio. The work she did is kind of a big deal. It went with the Smithsonian Traveling Exhibition all over the country, has been exhibited in multiple universities around Ohio, and now we have it here. So Clara will be talking about her work with that project, and we'll do a little interview with her later this afternoon if you'd like to learn more about it. You can also go to our main library at 201 North Mulberry Street and walk through the exhibition. It's in English and Spanish. And we have the panels set up so that as you wander, you kind of move through both. It's really beautiful. And we're very proud to have that be part of what we're able to share with the people of Knox County. If you know a youngin', the Teen Makerspace has been doing some fantastic crafts. And this week they're doing tin art, and like, it's really cool. I don't know how to describe it. Look at our website because there are some beautiful pictures, but they're after 3:30 today. Anybody over the age, any teen from 13 to 18 can go to the library and get up to 2 craft bags, and you take it home, you watch the video, and you make this beautiful stuff at home. There is also a copy of The House on Mango Street in every bag, and some information on a teen writing program workshop that Crystal is doing with us on March 16th. So we would love love to see young people getting involved in this. And this is a story that's set with in Cisneros' in Esperanza's teen years. So it really, in many ways, it's not YA, but it is YA, like young adult fiction. And I think that another reason that we picked it was to be mindful that not all of our readers are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. We wanted to find something that had enough breadth and that would also be meaningful to some of our younger readers at the library. So that's what we've got going on. And if you look at our website, www.knox.net, you can see a full list of programs. You can also find these on our calendar. And we're just really excited to bring all of these events to all of you. I don't see any questions. So I think, like, Fisher, did you have anything for us? Okay.
I've got a question or two.
Okay.
So I'd imagine that you've read this book quite a few times. How has your perception or your reading of it changed over the years or over your different times reading it?
Yeah, Esperanza, as Jamie Lynn said, matured throughout this book and throughout these vignettes, and I definitely feel the same. I think when I first read this, I was about either in middle school, and I know that a lot of one of my best friends teaches middle school, and she's teaching House on Mango Street every year, and that's the so I feel like when you're at that age, if I can sort of access that, I remember it being very accessible and feeling very seen and feeling very much connected to it, but not necessarily, I think, picking up on all of the subtext. I picked up on a lot of the subtext, but now as a person about 20 years older, I'm picking up so much more with my theoretical context, but that doesn't make it, I feel like both readings were exactly what I needed at the time, and I don't feel like my reading as a younger person was any lesser, right? It was that's all to say that this is I think that's why this book is so resonant throughout so many generations, as Jamie Lynn was saying, is it has something for everybody, and that accessibility makes it there's so much to continue to mine. I think that I'll read it, I'll continue to, as I continue to revisit it 10, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, and I'll get something different. But yeah, I'm thinking particularly about some of the older women that she meets, and is kind of seeing their some of the things they confess to her, some of the things she notices about their situations, and she thinks it rather strange as a child who is meeting someone different for the first time might think. And then now as an older person, I'm like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what's going on there, and it's more heartbreaking, but also more, yeah, it just gets better and better with age, I suppose.
I think I don't actually remember the first time that I read this. I feel like it's been on the radar for so long. And, and also in the interest of full disclosure, both Crystal and I have degrees in English literature. So this is sort of part of what, it's one of the things that I think everybody reads, right? When you're studying in the United States, you can't get away from the House on, who would want to, but it's such an important part of the curriculum to say it properly in the United States, particularly for people who are educators, right? Which we both are. And so I know that I encountered this well before I was in graduate school, but I can't recall the first reading. And so I think for me, I don't really recollect, honestly, so much reading it when I was younger, but reading it as someone who was at the time, like really focusing on it when I was a teacher and thinking like, wow, this is going to be so great for my 9th graders, 10th graders, or, like whatever I was planning to put into the curriculum, and the ways that it would also open up, for kids to write about their own experiences and know that their voice matters, and that these are stories that can be used as a model for their own writing, that you don't have to write a 300-page novel. You can write a page and a half and be profoundly moving and incredibly powerful with that work. And then to take those, to revisit this again in my work as a writer, it's just so powerfully instructive, and again, like the density and economy of her language, as someone who struggles to keep a chapter under 7,000 words, like it's really so powerful to me to see how much she gets across in such a short framework for each of these, and the way too that a naive narrator can function to be incredibly wise, So coming at it in lots of different directions, I think I had to learn how to read it properly, and also to mark the way that the character develops across time, which I mentioned earlier. And those are all things that each time I read it, I find something new to admire and to respect and love and think about. So that was another reason that it, was such a shoo-in for this particular project.
At any age, it's an invitation, right? Like whatever age you read it, it's an invitation.
Yeah. Well, I think that we have covered all of our bases in terms of today. And if there aren't any further questions, then what I would say is, first of all, thank you, Crystal, for being with us today. And thank you, Fisher, for keeping everything running smoothly. And thank you to the National Endowment for the Arts, NEA Big Read, and Arts Midwest. On behalf of the Public Library of Mount Vernon and Knox County, I want to thank everyone for coming and for watching today if you're viewing this later. And just keep an eye on our website for more NEA Big Read events. We hope to see you there virtually and sometimes in person. Have a great afternoon. Thanks, everybody.